Hello everyone and welcome back to DevTube. In this video, I have my really good friend Farhan with me here today, and we're going to discuss about a small messaging app project that we worked on late in the summer. So first, we're going to be talking about our tech stack, as in the different technologies we used, as well as our way of executing our project. But before we do start, Farhan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and share your background?
Hey guys, my name is Farhan. I'm a second year student at NYU Tandon, currently majoring in computer science. My aspiration for the near future, is to basically be a software engineer and join companies in creating change and innovation using the power of technology. I've had some experience in programming coming from high school, but I've kind of learned the most of programming basics during my first year of college. And if I talk about the outside experience I've had in programming, in the field of computer science in general, I was a teaching assistant for an internship this year, where I kind of taught incoming college freshmen on the basics of programming in the Python language, and also developing web applications using the Flask web application framework solely based on Python, and also teaching them how to use powerful tools like APIs and MongoDB. Um, and after that internship, I've actually had a great opportunity to work with ISFAR and creating this messaging app that we'll talk about throughout this video. And it was a great way to it was my first experience being exposed to full stack web applications, where I got exposed to both the front end and the back end side of developing. So, with no further ado, let's get started into actually introducing the app. Uh, for this app, we used Node.js. That's basically a backend language that is used with JavaScript. And for Node.js, we use the Express Web Application Framework. So I'll actually bring up the code, and you can see through lines 1 to 10, we have the Express framework that is imported after installation in the terminal. And that basically takes care of all the built-in packages that we used from Express to incorporate into our web application. And some of these modules that we've imported from Express are Mongoose, responsible for connecting to the MongoDB that we use as our database, in addition to Sessions, responsible for user authentication, and Socket.io, one of the most important modules, responsible for handling messaging communication using WebSockets between the client side and the server side. So, Isfar, why don't you go ahead and start talking about sessions?
Yeah, so sessions, as you can see, we've imported here on line 9, client sessions. So the reason why we need sessions is because if you have different users in, let's say, for a website, you want all sorts of users to be able to use it, not just one. So that's actually why several websites actually say, uh, we use cookies, please accept. And let's go into detail. So here from lines 37 to 43, we see that our app is using the client session dependency, and our cookie name is session. And in order to encrypt the session that the user is using, we actually have a string that acts as a secret. So kind of like a key almost. And then these parameters are used to declare how long the session is going to last. So let's go into, let's see. line 365. So here in this line, in this function, this is our login function. So whenever a user logs in, and if the user password is correct, if it matches with the one that's in the database, we're going to set the session user to be an object of the user object in the MongoDB database. So then we can access the current user for that session anywhere in our code. Um, so yeah, so here we have rec.session.user. We were able to use the current, we have access to the current user at any given time, which is actually really helpful. And if you, so Farhan and I are just gonna sign up real quick. And then click sign up. It says account created successfully. And then if I sign in, then I'm here. And let me just cross this out. Now, if you were to go into a new tab and then go into settings, then you can go down to your cookies and other site data, and then go into see all cookies. And then you can see that down here below, we have a cookie. It says obscure -crag and then so on, which is actually the link of our site. So if you go in to this, and this was the session name, if you remember, it was called session. I'll quickly show it again. It was right here. The cookie name is session, so therefore it's session over here. And then all the content is actually encrypted based on the secret that's stored in here. So even if someone was to hack into the cookie, they won't be able to know what the content is just because it's encrypted. So then, Farhan, why don't you go into our EJS templating and rendering and so forth.
So EJS is basically a templating engine. It's basically responsible for whatever variables we create in the backend. If we want to pass in any variables to the front end, which is HTML, CSS, etc., we use EJS in order to handle this passing variables between both sides. So if I were to show an example of EJS, we have in our code, if we go to later on in the code, we can show the way we use EJS for our actual messaging as an example. If I go to the get method for messages, so the get method is basically getting the messages from the user to pass into the backend. So if we're looking at this, if we're looking at the EJS templating, we look at line 281, and line 281, we are rendering messages, and when rendering messages, we are passing in variables that are created in this backend file. We're passing in friends, we're passing in the name of the users in the chat. We're passing in the user ID to keep track of the session. And we're also actually passing in the message that the backend keeps track of, so that we can actually display the message in our EJS file. And we can actually see that if we go to messages.ejs, and we see here, let's see. Yep, so if we're looking at this bit of code right here, the syntax for EJS in the front end side, we have these less than greater than signs, we have this percent sign, and this is basically JavaScript code where we iterate through a for loop, and we're accessing the username that the messages that we created in the backend, and using that we can access the username, display the time in which the user sent the message, as well as the actual message that the user typed. So that's basically all of the EJS. That's basically one aspect of EJS, although there are multiple other scenarios where we incorporate EJS. But this is basically the most important part of EJS. So now, after we talk about sessions, after we talk about EJS, we should actually talk about MongoDB. And Isfar, why don't you talk about the MongoDB aspect of our application?
Yeah, so let me just minimize this. So if we were to go into our collections, right? So this is our database right now on the MongoDB site. And if we refresh, and you see that I've registered so far. If you can, Farhan, it would be good if you register too in the meantime, so we can show how the chatting works. Um, so one aspect or one portion of code where we do use Mongoose, I guess, is in users.js. So we are requiring the dependency up on the top, and then we have our user schema, and it contains all of the information that's attached to one specific user. So now, once that schema has been made, we are initializing a user model, and then this model right here can be accessed throughout the file. And here you can see that we're actually finding a user and under this new socket function. And Farhan will actually go more into depth about sockets in a moment. But for now, just know that this find one function just goes through the database, searches for the user with this username, and then does some other stuff with that data. And then at the end, we just export user. And what the export does is now, if you go into index.js, if you go to the top, you can see that we're actually requiring that module. And now we have access to the user model here in index.js. You can see that we're using it just as fine as the other file. So let's see, yeah. So suppose we can minimize this now, and I'll minimize, well, let me reload just to make sure Farhan has made an account. Yeah, okay, so Farhan has made an account successfully. Now let's show how the actual chat works. So the first thing we have to do is go to my friends, and then add a friend. So then Farhan's username is fmash123. So I'm just gonna type in fmash123, click search, and then he's there. I'm gonna press add, and then my request should appear on Farhan's screen. So Farhan, once you've accepted, just let me know.
Yep, I'm about to accept the request right now. Did it?
All right, so now if we reload, we can see that Farhan is now one of my friends. Now if I go to messages, I can click create chat. I'll just type in NYU as the chat name. I'll press create, and then you can see that NYU pops up over here. So now you can see that we're still in our home page. So if you click into NYU, you get this page that pops up. And now I can message and stuff, but we'll get to that. The more important thing to notice, or I guess about this subtopic, was if you remember I mentioned URL querying. And you can see that up over here in our URL is just not one of our directories anymore. It's not just messages. It's not just my friends. It also has a query attached to it. And this question mark actually delegates that. So we have a chat ID called NYU here. If we go back to the code, if we go to line 79 of messages.ejs, then you can see that the A tag for the NYU chat has an href of messages, of course, because we want to render the messages page. And then it also has the chat ID. And the chat ID is actually being listed in the URL from the backend. As you can see right here, this is where Farhan mentioned is one of our other parts of the code where we do use EJS rendering. And so yeah, that's important because it allows us to differentiate which messages show up. So if I create another chat, and if I call this, let's say Stony Brook, and if I create that, then if I go to NYU, say I add Farhan, and now if I cross it out, and let me just check the members. Yes, Farhan is now a member of the chat. And now if I type in hi, Farhan should be able to see it in the NYU chat. Farhan, if you can go ahead and type a message back, that would be great.
Wait, type the message.
I think, yeah, I think you're in my screen. So why don't you just, should I,
yeah, that's
yeah.
not the way. Yep, so.
Okay, so if you notice, this is actually a traverse bot. It's allowing, it tells us that Farhan has read the message or has entered the chat basically. And now here's the message from Farhan. So now so as you can see, Farhan has a message that's been sent right here. And if I go into Stony Brook now, if I type in hello, Farhan won't be able to see that message. And Stony Brook would actually not even appear on his screen because I haven't added him yet. So that's why querying is actually so important. And actually, if you go into Facebook's Messenger, right? If you go into their desktop Messenger application, not the one that's part of the Facebook that has the newsfeed and everything, but the separate messenger that's attached. If you go there, if you click into your separate in your separate chats, you'll actually see a query there. They don't have your friend's name per se, I think, but they do have like an ID. that's unique to each group chat, to each person, and so on. So that's basically URL querying. It's one of the most important parts of our project. But now, last but most important, Socket.io, which is like a real-time dependency uh, that goes back and forth with with front and back end. Farhan, would you like to discuss more about that?
Yeah, sure. So Socket.io is basically a free dependency that's in Express that basically allows us to actually handle communication between the client side and the server side. I can actually show what Socket.io looks like if you go to their website, socket.io. They talk about how they are a free WebSocket framework that allows communication between server and client side to happen. You can even check out their documentation if you ever wanted to make your own chat application. If you go under Learn, they have a Get Started, simple tutorial on how to start a simple web server, and you can go further in depth and check out their documentation to make the communication more advanced. So we'll actually show our code to see how we apply Socket.io. As we said, Socket.io handles communication between the server and the client. The server in this case is Node.js, and the client in our case is our client-side JavaScript. So if we take a look at our server-side JavaScript, Node.js, we see that first, before anything, we import Socket.io, as you see in line 10. And then after we import Socket.io, we instantiate a Socket.io server. The server is declared in line 17, which creates a server of our Express app. All of these are interconnected. We store an IO variable to create a Socket.io server, and after that, we can actually go deep into our IO variable. And starting from line 74, we start a connection from the server using the variable socket. And within this connection, we do a lot of things. After we create the connection, we create a join room command. And join room is basically responsible for handling users entering rooms. So like once a user is newly entered into a chat, this join room is responsible to handle all that stuff. We have methods such as joining room, creating room, adding users, all that stuff. And if I show you guys our client-side code handling Socket.io, if we go into our public folder and we go inside our client-side JavaScript and we click our main.js, here we have the client-side JavaScript, and we create variables storing messages, user information that comes from the HTML. And these become helpful when we want to incorporate Socket code on the client side. We create a socket command where we have this add user that, if you remember, you see in the server.js. We have our add user command. We create this. So what we do is, hold up. Yep. So over here, we create an add user from the client side, and in the server, we catch that add user command, And once the server catches it, it does all of this stuff on the back end. So the user does not see any of this happening. This happens secretly on the server. It's searching for the user. It's uh, it's fetching the user, and once that happens, we actually send this info back using the emit command. Emit is basically sending something to one side or the other, and then after you emit, the other side has to catch it. And we catch it using the on command, as you can see here. And as we see here, the emit was initiated for the chat message command. If we look back up, actually is not up. Yeah, so in line 88, we have an emit command that goes to join message, and then in main.js we catch it using the on method, and here we template this information such as the date, the message, which is an object taking in username, text, and time. So that is basically a walkthrough of how we use Socket.io in our web application. And Socket.io is a very useful and very simple to use. I mentioned this before, but it's very simple to use. It doesn't take that much time to take a look at documentation and actually replicating it on your side.
Okay, so that was a great explanation of Socket.io, and it really did speed things up. At first, Farhan and I were planning to just um, store stuff in the database, and then I suppose like render each time, and then that would have just taken a really long time, and I think like it wouldn't be as efficient as using WebSockets. Um, and yeah, I guess the last thing would be is just logging out. When you log out, it actually destroys the session, and you can't. Well, I guess you're basically back here, and then if you try to actually go into the messages, you actually won't be able to, and it would say please log in or create an account first. So that's actually the power of sessions. You can limit the scope when it comes to user access to each particular file. So that's all. I guess the other thing is that we have this. I don't know if you've noticed, but our URL actually says Heroku app, which just means that we have our website up on Heroku, which is basically like a service that hosts other people's websites, and if we want to, sooner or later, Farhan and I can get a URL, paste this in, and then it'll represent that instead. And we do plan to expand this app later on. Our idea is to make it like our name is Traverse, so our vision is to basically expand it to an app where people can get together and plan trips, but then at the same time talk about the trips. We plan to incorporate some sort of calendar system, some sort of blog system, but that's much later down in the line, just because we're packed up with assignments from college. Farhan, do you have any other last comments or thoughts?
Also, in terms of future vision, we were also planning on probably creating a mobile version of Traverse, because we know that nowadays a lot of power happens to our smartphones. Smartphones are easily accessible as opposed to something like a laptop or a desktop. So for the idea of making this a travel web application, we could potentially create a mobile version of this app, maybe either using an iOS language like Swift, or maybe an Android version of the app. We could use Kotlin, which is a very powerful language to handle that Android actually uses for creating mobile web applications. Yeah, and that's it in terms of future vision.
Okay. So, hey everyone, if you skip to this section, it means that you're not really interested in the code. You just want to see a walkthrough of how it works. So, I guess the first thing would be is to arrive at the website, yeah, and then just sign up, and then after signing up, you log in. So so that's my email. Let me put in my password, and let me just sign in. So here I am. So if I go into NYU, I have these messages already that were already sent, and then I guess the second most important step is to add friends, make your friends accept your friend requests, and then they'll appear in your friends list. And then if you go into messages, you can create chats. After creating a chat, you enter the chat, and then so let me enter the chat. And after entering the chat, you add users by just clicking add, and then you can check if they've been properly added by just going into the members list, cross that out, and then you can start messaging. So yeah, that's a quick demo of how our web application works.
Also, if you are interested in wanting to learn how the web app actually works, the GitHub link to the code will be posted down in the description. You can check out the GitHub code, and in it you'll see how we actually created the chat application. And perhaps if you aren't able to follow along with the code, we also try to explain how the code works earlier on in the video. You can basically look through those parts of the video where we try to explain how we use certain technologies to create this product.
Yeah. So uh, just a side comment here. We know that several of you who view our videos have subscribed, but there's still a good amount of people who are watching, which is great, but you guys haven't subscribed. It's at least 40%, so please do subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hope to see you in the next one.
Take care,
Okay.
guys.